back to another episode. Thanks for tuning in. If you haven't already, please hit that like button, subscribe, keep up to date with what I'm trying to share with you guys. So the topic I want to chat about today, it revolves around Danielle Brandon and Underdogs Athletics coach Justin Kotler. So Justin Kotler is the coach of the Underdogs Athletics team. So the athletes who he's had over the last couple of years, so Kari Pearce, Bethany Shadburn, Danielle Brandon, he's actually recently signed Ricky Grant as well. He's got a few other athletes in stable as well. Obviously Bethany isn't going to the games this year due to an injury that she got before the Opens. And then also Kari Pearce, she retired last year. Now that left Danielle Brandon as one of their number one athletes on the Underdogs Athletics side. It's just been announced a couple of days ago that Danielle Brandon is no longer with the Underdogs Athletics squad. So she actually competed at, I think it was the Mid-Atlantic Challenge or the West Coast Classic, one of those two. And she actually won that competition and qualified for the CrossFit Games out of that. So when she was there, Justin Kotler was her coach. Now that was only a couple of weeks ago, then all of a sudden this has all happened. In that time since the competition for the semi-final, and now we've seen that Danielle Brandon has actually gone to several of the other training camps. Justin Kotler was with her when she went to the Hard Work Pays Off, so Matt Fraser. And then she also did time with the Brute Strength team. And I also saw on her social media that she was at Tennessee where the Proven squad trains. Now, then it was announced that Danielle Brandon is no longer with the Underdogs Athletics. Nothing has been announced about where she is training now or whether she's even going to have a coach for this year's CrossFit Games or what is happening with her. It's just been announced that she's no longer in the Underdogs Athletics squad anymore. That brings me to my point that I want to talk to you guys about. So these athletes are high-level athletes and they have coaches who manage their programming, who help them get to the stage of where they need to go or what they need to achieve to get to the CrossFit Games. In this instance, for example, Danielle Brandon's only a few weeks out from the CrossFit Games and no longer has a coach that we are aware of, no longer has someone writing her programming that we're aware of, and now the Underdogs Athletics squad no longer has one of their star athletes competing at the CrossFit Games. So this makes me wonder, do you think that elite athletes and coaches should have contracts to lock them into, say, seasons, for example? So let's look at Mallory O'Brien. So last year, Mallory O'Brien went to the CrossFit Games. She had her long-time coach, James Townsend, I believe is his name. He was coaching her. He wasn't well known. She wasn't well known in the sport. She was this new, young, up-and-coming athlete. Then she actually did really well at the CrossFit Games. Then all of a sudden after the CrossFit Games, she's training with Matt Fraser. Now, was there any real need for her to leave her previous coach and go to Matt Fraser? Probably not. She was already achieving so much with her current coach. It's interesting to see how some of these athletes just chop and change their coaches based on maybe who their coach is. So for example, a lot of athletes would probably take on the opportunity to train with, say, Matt Fraser, 5-time fittest man on earth, to be able to work with someone who obviously did so well themselves in the same sport. So in saying that, people like, for example, Sarah Sigmasoto, she's changed her coach a few times. She's had about 3 coaches over the last few years. So that goes to show that they are shopping around. Like sometimes coaches aren't the right fit for the person, but sometimes also coaches and athletes, I believe, need to get to know each other quite well. And then sometimes they might get too comfortable with each other and it just doesn't work anymore. You need something new. So for example, in the situation with Katrin Davis-Stoddard and Ben Bergeron, they were together for a very long time, coach and athlete. They had a very close relationship. So whether or not their friendship became too much and it took away a little bit of the focus from the training side, in saying that, obviously they're all professional athletes and stuff, but I think that Katrin knew that she needed to change it up. It didn't work for her this year, however, going to a new coach. In saying that, I think that if she sticks with the coach that she's with this year, So with Annie Thorisdottir's coach, if she sticks with them, next year is going to be a different game set for her, and I think that she could definitely qualify back to the CrossFit Games next year. Now, when we talk about contracts for athletes and stuff, do you guys think that these athletes should be signing contracts to lock themselves into a coach for, say, let's say they sign on for an initial season, see how they go, or an initial 2 seasons? Because sometimes in that first season, it's all about learning about each other as well, seeing how they're going to work off each other, seeing their strengths and weaknesses at different points of the road along the way to the CrossFit Games. How they perform in the opens might not be how they perform when they're in-person live competition. So having that, and then say being contracted to do 2 seasons with a coach, stops them from going, okay, well, I had a pretty shitty run at the CrossFit Games this year, so I'm going to change coaches and go somewhere else and try to see if they can get me better. But instead of playing it out and having a second season on top, which I personally feel that Mallory O'Brien should have done with her previous coach before going to Matt, I think she should have stuck it out and went, okay, I had a pretty good season this year with my current coach. Let's see where we can get next year, considering how well he already knows me and all the work and the hard effort that he's put in to making me be the athlete I am today. Do you guys feel that these athletes should maybe have contracts with their coaches? Should the coaches have contracts with the athletes where the coaches can't, kick them off the squad, or unless there's certain reasons, or if they both agree that they don't work well together or whatever? So, not being in that situation where I'm not an elite athlete and I don't really know anyone who's under contracts. I mean, in different sports and stuff, there are contracts to do with coaching and stuff, and the coach is usually contracted by the club. But CrossFit's an individual sport, so it's a little bit different in that regard. So I'd be interested to see what you guys think about this and get your feedback on it, whether you guys believe that coaches and athletes should have contracts to lock them into seasons and then extend over time or change after their contract runs out, not mid-contract or after only 1 season of working together. The other thing I want to talk about was Nick Joyal. So he qualified through the Atlas Games from the semi-finals to the CrossFit Games. He obviously had to submit a drug sample after qualifying for the CrossFit Games. He then decided to announce that he had actually taken banned substances at the start of the season, he said for a 2-week period, to try and enhance his performance for this year's CrossFit Games. Now, we haven't heard from CrossFit yet whether his test came back positive or not. That hasn't been released as far as I'm aware. However, him announcing himself, does that mean that he gets banned? What if his test comes back negative and he's announced this, but his test is actually negative? So it'll be interesting to see what the results are of this and where it goes. I have read that a lot of people are comments on his post where he, announced that he'd done this and he had taken this wrong journey and everything like that. And a lot of people are writing underneath that he, is courageous and he did the right thing by, announcing that he'd done stuff. But then there's other people who are also saying, why are you congratulating someone who did something so wrong, Obviously with the whole Ricky Garrard saga, people were just on his case all the time about, the choices that he made and the negative impact it had, and then how he robbed Patrick Vellner of his 3rd place standing on the podium in 2017. And Ricky's obviously done his time and he's coming back this season, and he's passed several drug tests coming back through into CrossFit, whereas Nick has just, he didn't make it to the CrossFit Games because he announced this right before the CrossFit Games even started. He did obviously podium at the Atlas Games, or he qualified at the Atlas Games and then took a spot off someone else. So people are saying, well, what about the person that he stole the spot off and everything? Do you think that he should have maybe announced this prior to competing at the Atlas Games, considering that if he felt guilty afterwards, why didn't he just say that he did it before and not go through the whole Atlas Games stage? So I'm a little bit confused about what his thought process may have been. I know there has been a couple of podcasts with him and stuff. So Sivan did a podcast with him, and he spoke about, you know, his choices and stuff that he made. I do commend him on, like, you know, announcing this. However, I do think that he probably could have announced this, or like taken himself out of the Atlas Games, considering that every athlete must know that they drug test the top like 10 athletes, or at least the top 5 athletes at every single semi-final. So if he felt like he was in that kind of state to be able to physically perform well enough to be able to qualify for the CrossFit Games, then maybe he should have thought about announcing this prior and removing himself from semi-finals so that the athlete who came 6th could qualify properly for the CrossFit Games, rather than being told, you know, afterwards, after someone announces that they've taken banned substances and they're not going to be qualifying or competing at the CrossFit Games. So I'd like to hear you guys' thoughts on that, whether you think that Nick Joyal did the right thing by announcing before CrossFit announced that he had failed a drug test, and what are your thoughts on what should happen to him if, say, his drug test does come back negative, but he's already announced that he had taken banned substances, but it's not in his test results, for example. Okay, so make sure you leave a comment below if you have any thoughts on this. I'd love to hear some thoughts from everyone. If you haven't already, please hit that like button, subscribe, keep up to date with what I'm trying to share with you guys. Thanks, crew.